Hello and welcome to Total College Football, the perfect show for any and every college football fan. I'm your host, Stefan Lako, and I am joined as always by the Travis May. You can find him on Twitter at FF_Travis M. You can also find all his work over at A to Z Sports. Travis, we're coming off a really exciting college football weekend, and we have maybe not the most thrilling slate of games coming up, but you know that always means we're in for some close, exciting finishes, some surprising results. But just in general, man, how are you doing? How's the football season treating you so far? We're like kind of officially a third of the way through, right?
Yeah, it's weird that we're like a third of the way through. It sneaks up on you, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, the season's actually already approaching over, and that it just feels terrible. Like I
And
hate that.
also,
Why is
in a
this?
way, only now starting because of like conference play.
Yeah, seriously though, it's just so I don't even know what to make of it. But I'm just excited that we're finally getting to some more meaningful games. Like all the games matter, but games that we're really finding out who these teams really are, who these players really are. I don't have to like look at these absurd efficiency profiles and go, yeah, that's going to change in a week, for too much longer. So yeah,
Right.
we're in the thick of things. I'm just enjoying it.
Yeah, no, it's great. And we have a great show lined up. We're going to get through some takeaways from last week. I can't wait to talk to you about that Georgia Alabama game. We're going to take some time to look ahead, talk about the Heisman market, from a betting perspective, but also just gives us an opportunity to talk about some of the best players and whether or not we think they actually have a path to the Heisman. We're going to look at some of the big matchups for next weekend. I mean, it's not the most exciting game, but there's some really exciting, what's the word I'm looking for? Like consequences to the outcomes of these games. Like some of this stuff is going to make a big difference for these teams' season outlook. Like, are they going to hit their win total? Are they going to go to a bowl? Do they have a shot at the playoff? And then finally, we are going to do some capital projections for players and kind of where we think they might land in the NFL draft next year. But let's not wait any longer, Travis. I cannot wait to talk to you about this Alabama Georgia game because it was an interesting game to say the least. Some people calling it like one of the best games ever played. I'm sorry. When I almost turned the game off, or at least like move it from the primary screen to a secondary screen so I can watch to see if
Yeah.
Clemson is going to cover minus 12 and a half in the first half, it means that something weird happened.
Well,
And
I
that
mean,
weird thing was, yeah, Bama
that
getting
might
off
be
to
a you
28.
problem though too.
Yeah,
Just
well, betting on betting on a Clemson game.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. At this, well, they are bouncing back, but yeah. That was wild. That was the first time since Kirby Smart's first season at Georgia that he was down at halftime by more than even 17 points, and it was more than that. So it had been a minute since he'd been in that spot. But props to
Right.
Georgia, props to Kirby Smart and the entire team and organization there, just to not freak out. And I know they eventually lost, but still to be in it,
Take the
and take the
lead.
lead. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So just wild finish. And the comeback nature of it, I get like people wanting to call it one of the best games ever because it's like the emotions and the swings, and like as a fan, like that's engaging with that kind of game is one of the most extreme experiences you can have. Like, and these two teams have done this before, but I, I wouldn't go so far as to say it was one of the best games ever. But even so, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it was a blast. So I've got a couple questions, and we're gonna, like we said off the top, we're gonna get into some Heisman talk later, and we can talk kind of a little bit about Jalen Milroe's ascension here. But Carson Beck now, a couple games in a row where he has looked at moments pretty average. Do you think there's reason to be concerned about Carson Beck, or do you think this is just like a game and a half blip? Maybe the lack of
Hmm.
weapons is starting to show. I'm curious because, as I don't know if you recall, but I was a little bit lower on Carson Beck going into the season. He was not my automatic QB1. So I've been a little bit more skeptical. So maybe this is just confirmation bias for me, or me wanting to be like, I was ahead of the curve. I knew he was trash, like Will Levis. Um,
I think that there is something to it, and I actually wrote it up because the big games at this point I come behind, and just from an analysis standpoint and content standpoint, because I'm not only writing my own content, but I'm pitching angles for other writers, and so really trying to find any and everything to talk it through. And when it came to Carson Beck and his processing for the really past 2 games at Kentucky and now with Alabama, it seems like there's just something going on where he's a little bit different this year. Maybe he's second guessing his weapons, like you said. Maybe it's second guessing his own kind of processing and where he's seeing things pre and post snap. But there was a real issue for the first half, especially, and even on some of the plays that worked out in the second half. It resulted actually in perhaps a wrong read, just kind of working out anyway. And so, like whether it was like diagnosing the right kind of coverage, pre-snap versus post-snap, being able to make a quick adjustment and the right pass on the right read, it just felt like he constantly kind of made bad decisions in kind of processing. So it wasn't always that it was slow processing. It was that his inability to adjust post snap to something that was disguised by, and probably shout out to Alabama and Womack for what they did in scheming it up and doing a lot of mix and match and just changing things post snap off of what they were showing. But I do have concerns. And so I wonder, well, there are going to be people that look into things way more so and more in depth than I am, and they're probably going to have similar concerns. And so when it comes down to it, is he in the mix for the first overall pick anymore? Not today. And so he's going to have to really, really change some things and clean up his processing and adjustments pre or post snap, especially to really put his team in the best spots moving forward. Otherwise, he's going to have a couple more games like this.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of big news right there, right? Like he
Yeah.
dropping in like people's perceptions anyway about where he's going to land in the NFL draft. Pretty big deal. Yeah, I came away, and we've talked about Jalen Milroe a ton on this show. Someone we kind of, I think you were 100% on board with it, but just this idea of like, man, the value at him for Heisman was just so great. I almost drove down to Albuquerque just to make that bet because we can't bet that here in Colorado. And my buddy lives in Albuquerque, but I did not, unfortunately, lay that plus 1,100 bet. But he's been great, and I really enjoy watching him play. He's like the perfect quarterback for the football, like for the video game too. You know, like he just makes everything look effortless. He's able to carry that team when he needs to, but oftentimes he can rely on his weapons, which is something that we can't really say for Georgia. And just seeing the amount of talent on that field with him, and you know who I'm talking about. It's been really exciting to see Alabama with another elite wide receiver. Just what difference that makes, because I think that's a piece that they had been missing in the last couple of years.
And it's just crazy that it is, again, we're going to say it again because everyone's been saying it, but he's 17 years old and that he's finding this great success because it's not normal. And he and Jeremiah Smith both are just going bonkers. Now even Cam Coleman on like a per game standpoint.
I was going to say that too.
So it's just like there's this
freshman.
Just this crew is balling out, and it's too fun for our nerdy fantasy football purposes, but just for real football purposes to have all these young players balling the way that they are. But Jalen Milroe is certainly firmly right there in the mix for the Heisman because of what he's done just every single week and where he ranks in all the key stats that really mean something in terms of predicting capital. He's way up there. And so, yes, a couple of times this year he's had issues again with sacks and pressure, but his mobility makes up for that. And so, like, I think we saw it kind of last year, even with Jaden Daniels, you know, his pressure to sack rate, which is what everyone likes to quote because they have a PFF subscription. Like, you know, it was higher than ideal rate. But the thing is, he's going off right now to start his NFL career, and it's because his mobility offsets a little bit of that liability that brings with, you know, making the wrong read in terms of dealing with pressure. But I think similarly, Milroe's traits might be even superior than Jaden Daniels, and so I think the upside in projecting not only the Heisman but for him to be the first overall pick in the NFL draft is looking better and better by the day.
Yeah, I mean that's super exciting, and Alabama, they still have. I mean, both these teams, Alabama, Georgia, we've joked about like they could still face each other 2 more times, but they have to face some of the really tough teams along the way. I do think they both still end up making it to the playoff, and I wouldn't be surprised if they play in the SEC championship game. So a lot more to come from these. I want to jump over to the Big 12, which is kind of like the snow globe, like you just kind of shake it and see where everything lands, and every week it's a little bit different. Cam Rising continues to not play for Utah, and they found themselves in the wrong end of a Arizona game, which Arizona had looked pretty bad up until this point outside of Ted McMillan. So that wasn't great. Oklahoma State loses. Um, Colorado with a huge upset win in the Big 12 as 2 touchdown underdogs. They actually looked like the better team on the field, pushing UCF around, which I did not expect to say. So Big 12 was kind of crazy this weekend. And from my perspective, I don't see that changing. And anyone who tells you they can guess both or name both teams that are going to be in the championship game, like go place a bet on that, because that's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, that's just impossible. So I'd love to see Kansas State doing well again. Avery Johnson just finds a way. He makes like 2 or 3 boneheaded throws a game. And you're like, what in the world was that? That was so inaccurate, so bad. There was some wrong read. And then, but 2 plays later, he'll do something like, okay, there's like 3 players in the entire country that can do that. And so the longer that Kansas State plays, the better for college football in general, because he's just too fun. So I, the Big 12 is going to be ridiculous because we're probably going to have something dumb that comes out of this season. Like it gets down to like, okay, there's like one clear team, whether that's Utah or Kansas State, whoever's like standing at the end. And then the second team comes in and they have 3 losses in the Big 12. And there's, okay, it doesn't make any sense for this team to be a playoff team. They're not a playoff team. And then they win that game.
Of course.
And they're just ultimately a bid thief. And so I don't know what that will mean for the team that is leading the way in the Big 12, because man, like there's a lot of games to be played at this point, but it would be hard to kick the clear favorite of the Big 12 championship out going in. So that the bid thief conversations that we're going to have in terms of the playoff down the stretch, those are going to be real when it comes to ACC and Big 12 both.
Yeah. Right now, if you had to kind of, do you still like Kansas State to come out as the victors in the Big 12?
I actually have a piece coming out tomorrow on the playoff projections, and they're firmly in the mix. But it is just a mess. At this point, there's really only like, I think it's a 1-bid league at this point, because they're just going to cannibalize each other down the stretch, and it really does look like whoever wins is going through, and whoever else is going to have at least 2 losses, if not 3, and that's going to be tough to really put in terms of in at large.
Yeah, and I think for me, like it's super fun. Like I think the Big 12 is super fun, but by no means do I think like these are all really, really good teams fighting for a spot. I think maybe there's 2 good teams, a couple on the right week, like Colorado on the right week. Man, they can play with a lot of teams. They could also get their ass beat by a lot of teams too.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, Utah, if they get their stuff together, I think that's probably where things are going to go. Ultimately, once they actually put it all together and they, have the right players that are healthy in the right spots. But
But
Kansas
I don't
State,
think Isaac Wilson can do it for them.
no,
Like they continue to let him. I mean, they have Sam Heward there, former 5-star recruit who was up at Washington for a while. Like Brandon Rose is a good, solid quarterback. Yet they just stick with Wilson, and it's a little disappointing for me. It's also kind of surprising that Utah, just given Cam's injury history, that they didn't have a better plan in place for a backup. Like this team is a good college quarterback away from being a playoff contender. And they know that. And they didn't bring someone in as kind of an insurance policy, and you're going to let a freshman and Isaac Wilson run it. Like, I think it's a mistake, especially with as little time as coach has left there. Like they've already named the next coach in waiting and stuff like that. Like it's probably got like 1 or 2 years, 2-3 years left. Like surprised they didn't go more in on that.
Yeah, it really, really is odd. And Isaac Wilson is like, by the meaningful metrics, I just reran all my positional models today, and the quarterback version of it, he's like the 62nd best power conference quarterback. which is not great. And he's like right
No,
next to DJU right now,
oof,
which is not great. He's actually below Ashton Daniels of Stanford, so it's like it's
not great.
no, he's one of the worst in the sport that has a starting power conference job. So hopefully, they get things put together. Although at the same time, hopefully, I'm kind of rooting for
You
Avery
got your
Johnson and Kansas State.
You
Yeah,
got your Kansas State future. I've got my Utah
yeah,
future. So we're on
exactly.
other sides of the fence on that one. Any other big takeaways for you for Saturday? I mean, Baylor remains. I mean, sorry, BYU remains undefeated, just staying in the Big 12 there, which is pretty hilarious. I mean, we have to talk about Kentucky. Moving over to the SEC, talk about Kentucky going to Oxford, upsetting Ole Miss, and again, probably doesn't knock Ole Miss out of their hopes for this season. Everything's still very much in reach. But when you lose to a team that you should win and you still have other teams on your schedule, I'm actually going to look up their schedule right now. So yeah, they still have Oklahoma. Well, I guess they only have LSU, Oklahoma, and Georgia that are probably really tough because I don't know what South Carolina is. But
Honestly, South Carolina's pass rush is nasty.
yeah,
So that could be a problem.
what's that
And
freshman kid they have?
oh man, they've got Stewart, and then they've got
Yeah,
Kennard and a couple other guys that are like, okay, they've got some dudes. And so I think South Carolina, and they took LSU down. There was like a field goal game. I think they're going to surprise. And if Lenore Sellers does get back fully healthy down the stretch here, I think they could really, really just play spoilers like the whole year
sure.
because they have enough talent that they can really just irritate. So, but yeah, I mean, like when it comes to Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart and oh man, the other guy, freaking TJ Sanders up the middle, who's done really good work for them already. Like they've just got some, and he's not like even though I go to, but he's been super efficient. Um, I don't know. They just got some really fun depth
I
up front, so that's gonna be a problem.
Yeah. I find myself rooting against Ole Miss because I want Tennessee to go in because I kept betting them to make the playoff. So I
Yeah.
need some other SEC teams to fall off. But before we look ahead, I mean, I could talk to you about Penn State, Illinois. I
Well,
could
we
talk to
didn't
you
really
about
talk about Ole Miss and how that happened. I mean, we can get
yeah,
to. We're going to talk about Jackson Dart, but he was really. It was just a couple bad decisions in that game from him. But overall, Kentucky just played coward ball. Like they were like, look, if we give Ole Miss too many possessions, we're gonna get annihilated. So they just played keep away for most of the game as much as they possibly could. And unfortunately, the tackling for Ole Miss was a huge problem. And I actually wrote that up this past week because it was just a mess, and it has been. They have over 30 missed tackles at the second level and third level of their defense so far in just like 5 weeks.
it's because of the
That's
transfer portal, Travis. I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
let's blame it on the portal.
I,
But
dude,
for,
yeah, I hate how
it's
everyone
just,
ends up for everything.
I mean, in terms of a whole team, that's been a problem for Ole Miss. They are much improved defense overall by most measures, but the missed tackle factor, if that would just help them get off the field. Like even
Yeah,
there was times where Brock Vandegrift he's athletic, but he's not super athletic, and he was converting like on third down runs and stuff like that, just dumb because there were bad angles, missed tackles, at people out of position. And I'm like, that has to be so frustrating as a coach to just see that happen because it was nonstop in that first half. They kind of cleaned up in the second, but down the stretch, it was it reared its ugly head again. And so, yeah, they were just Ole Miss. What they were doing in terms of an efficiency, like per drive and per play efficiency, and the volume of plays that they were running coming into that game, the only way to stop them was to play keep away. And just Kentucky played the perfect game in that regard.
yeah. Yeah, we were texting to start that game, and you're like, "Oh, Ole Miss doing," and then it just slowed down. I was like, "What the heck happened?" Because I wasn't watching that game. I had my eyes on some of the other games, and yeah, that one
Yeah.
definitely took me by surprise.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the
That
first half, the Kentucky had the ball over 20 minutes. So
that's
ridiculous.
yeah, that's wild. A couple other, I mean, like I said, I'd love to talk to you about Penn State, Illinois. I think Illinois showing that they're a good team, not great. And Penn State doing enough to win a tough game, which I mean, Ole Miss can't say that. What were some of the other big standouts for you? I'm trying to think. I mean, your Auburn team broke your heart, I'm sure, once again. I was
Oh,
impressed by you
always.
with
That
yeah.
was always going to happen, dude. Like that
Yeah.
was. I
I mean,
mean,
I took
it's Auburn, man.
Oklahoma because
Yeah,
of you're like, we'd be okay if it wasn't for all the turnovers, but man, all those turnovers. And once again, pick six. Like,
the
let's
turnover. Yeah,
go.
just the worst timed turnover of all time, and so that's just such a Peyton Thorne move. So yeah, they lose to Michael Hawkins, who props to him. Michael Hawkins in his first
That
true
rushing
start.
touchdown looked fun. That was a
Yeah,
good
man.
one.
True freshman. He just some bad angles. It's like they just didn't realize, he's fast. And so that's tough to make up for. I was really kind of hoping that Michigan was gonna lose to Minnesota.
No,
Uh
man,
and
they were
they got
storming
ripped
back.
off. Did you watch how that game ended?
Hell no.
Oh
I
my
was on
gosh.
-9.5. I was so pissed that
So
that didn't hit.
I had to write it up because even in post, like they had Mike Pereira on, he didn't even know what to say. It was such a blatant, horrible, missed call, just incorrect call in terms of
On the
there's
onside
not
kick.
on the onside kick. Yeah, I mean there was nobody, nothing. There was offsides, and they just like, well, yeah, that looks wrong. So like they recover it, and there was
Mm,
nothing, no penalty whatsoever. But they threw the flag, and then of course didn't recover it on the next one. And who's to say what would have happened?
right.
They might not have scored. They might have turned the ball over right away. But to just end the game there essentially on a just blatantly wrong call, and even the rule specialist couldn't even really back them up. And then in post, Fox Sports, like the main desk was just like, "Well, that was terrible." Like
Oh no.
just eviscerating these refs. Like
Ugh.
there's probably going to be suspensions. I haven't seen that that's dropped yet, but I have buddies that were in the in the
Right.
officiating world that they do
We
mainly
had them on the old show.
yeah, we did in
Yeah.
the SEC, and then they do some like Sun Belt crossovers, and there are when there's that blatant of a just horrifically obviously wrong call, there are suspensions that are handed out, and so that's going to be something that I'll definitely write up here this week if news of that does drop, because we'll be getting that news probably tomorrow if it's going to happen. So that
Yeah.
would be, as of this recording anyway, that would be Wednesday. So hopefully, unless I've missed something already prior to this recording because I just said kid, but that was just ridiculous. And so Michigan is such a problem. Like they're going to beat all these fake teams that are bad, but now when it comes to a team that actually has anywhere near the same talent, their quarterback play is going to kill them because they don't have one.
So speaking of them getting beat by teams, USC could not get it done against Michigan, but they did get it done against Wisconsin, although it looked a little sketchy to start. Where are you on USC right now? Because looking at the whole body of work and looking at some of the teams they beat and what those teams look like now, and some of the teams like Michigan that they lost to, and then Michigan just continuously showing us their flaws, and USC not being able to come out on top there, struggling against a Wisconsin team. Like I know everyone was really excited about USC and their defense after pitching that one shutout against Utah State, blah 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 blah. I'm not bought in on USC. Should I be?
I mean, it just basically took Will Millings having no business doing what he did, breaking 70,000 tackles on that play to run for over 60 yards against USC. But they were down. Michigan was down against USC and had no business winning that game. They had to drive 90 yards in like a minute and did so because of one play that should never have happened. And so, yeah, USC, if you reran the Sims on that game, they should have won that game against Michigan way more than they should have lost. And so USC is better than Michigan, and it's not close. And so that's a reason why. I mean, like it was kind of close that day, but like again, if you look at the meaningful metrics, like USC was just they should have won that game. And so I'm a believer in that they could squeak into the playoff because Michigan's down this year, and I think they're going to continue to shed games. But and Penn State showed us this week that they're not as perfect as they might be.
Again,
So
against Bowling Green, they did it again. I mean, like they've had their hiccups as well.
yeah, and so USC, I think is just if they can just hang around like this, they're going to be in good position to push to be in the Big Ten championship. Like that's on the table at this point, because Oregon's not been perfect either. They looked pretty good on if you watched all that game this past weekend. but a couple untimely mistakes kept UCLA in the game. But they looked pretty
I
good.
went to sleep at halftime because the game started at 10 p.m. for me or some
Yeah,
crazy nonsense.
yeah. Well, I watched the whole thing because I was up watching freaking my first screen was actually Ashton Jeanty though.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean,
So
we'll get
yeah,
to him in a second.
but USC is real. That's the short
Okay.
answer.
Okay. I maybe again it's that Oregon Duck in me that just doesn't want to believe that USC is good anymore. I just really enjoy when they had like that recruiting class in like the 60s or whatever when Helton was their coach. Like
Yeah,
give me those days again. That was fun.
yeah.
Um let's jump into some Heisman talk because the updated numbers here are pretty exciting here. We start off, I mean, the reason I'm excited to talk about this year is usually we're like, okay, who's the best quarterback or which quarterback is going to have the best statistical year? And this season, we have a little bit of excitement thrown in the mix because we have two extremely special, unique players that do not play quarterback. One, who you just mentioned, is Ashton Jeanty, who very well, I mean, he's unless he gets hurt, he's going to hit 2,000 yards pretty easily. He might finish the year closer to 3,000 than 2,000. And then we have Travis Hunter, who plays almost every snap, is one of the top wide receivers in the league, and has had a couple game-changing defensive plays. I mean, a game-winning forced fumble against Baylor, and then another huge pick last week that kind of shifted the game to CU against UCF. So these two exciting players to me make this conversation a little bit more unique than like let's just talk about quarterbacks for 15 minutes. Do you think
Yeah,
either one of these guys has a legitimate shot to win the Heisman? Not be up for it, not go to New York, but actually win it.
well, if they don't, then that's just broken. I think that they really do though, because Travis Hunter is so unique. He's just become something that it's hard to say we've never seen, but we might have never seen something like this ever. So
Right.
to play like, about 2,000 snaps a game and to be as good as he is on both sides of the ball, and to consider that he could be a top 10 pick at either wide receiver or cornerback, and he might be better at wide receiver now, is just insane. So
Yeah.
he's truly unique and he should win because of what he's doing on both sides of the ball. But Ashton Jeanty is on pace to break Barry Sanders' records.
Yeah.
And I wrote that up before I went to bed. I was at like 1:00 at whatever it was, and I was like, because I was realizing before the game was even over, I was like, when was what? How is this happening? Because and Barry Sanders, the records have been standing for 36 years for single season rushing and single season rushing touchdowns, around 2,600 something yards for rushing and like 37 touchdowns or so for rushing touchdowns. And Ashton Jeanty's on pace for over 2,700 rushing yards through like 13 game pace, and that's if they don't make the playoff in the last spot, and on pace for like 42 rushing touchdowns. So if he doesn't win with that, then we shouldn't even have the award be for the best player. It's just best quarterback. So he will win if he does that down the stretch.
Even over Travis Hunter, if Travis Hunter
He will.
continues Travis
Yeah,
Hunter
because
thing.
Travis Hunter is just like, if you put 2,700 rushing yards up and you break Barry Sanders' record, if you have a vote, I'm sorry, it is revoked now. If you don't
Even if
vote for
it's the
Ashton
Mountain
Jeanty,
West, they're going to be playing Wyoming. They're going to be
The-
playing like,
you know what? They know it's coming and they can't stop it. So
yeah.
he's averaging 10.3 yards per carry right now.
This
10.3,
is
and
like
it's not like,
when you're playing the video game and this happens, you're like, I need to adjust. I need to move up.
yeah,
I need to move up
gotta
to
move up the
Heisman. This is
difficulty.
too easy.
And he's like, real life, no, I'm just breaking it more than you would on freshman difficulty in a video game.
Yeah. All right. So I don't like that take at all, Travis, because I really want Hunter to win this thing. And I think Hunter can if he stays healthy, because I think Shador has to stay healthy too, because I don't know if
Yeah.
Schaub or whatever the backups, and who cares? I don't know if he's going to be able to deliver the football to Travis the way that Shador can.
Yeah.
But speaking of Shador, he's not on like the top 10 favorites for the Heisman. which is probably a good thing for Travis Hunter. But I don't see his name on here when I looked this morning. The top two quarterbacks right now, and there's a huge jump. I mean, it's Jalen Milroe at plus 175, and then at plus 500, who's the next highest player, is Cam Ward. So right now, it looks like it's Jalen Milroe's to lose. Now, a couple weeks ago, it was Carson Beck's to lose. Like, so it can all happen really, really fast. Carson Beck has dropped down to like 8th or something like that, tied with Quinn Ewers and Miller Moss at plus 2,500. So you mentioned earlier that like maybe his NFL draft stock has dropped a little bit. Well, his Heisman hype has dropped a ton, and Arch Manning's nowhere to be seen. I hope to God that you did not. You are not one of the people that put your money on that. I know you weren't. I'm talking to our 42 listeners right now.
Yeah, so no, I'm not one of those people. And Arch Manning, what he's doing is insane. And by the meaningful metrics, it's hard to deny that he's actually been a top 5 quarterback in all of college football when he's started, because he kind of has, just objectively so, by everything that matters. But no, I'm not one that bet on him. Jalen Milroe, it's really tough to deny when you look at what he's doing. Does he have the crazy passing volume numbers that are typically required to win the Heisman? No. But what he does have is crazy high rushing efficiency and just the big play, like already Heisman moments on his resume now. And so already having like 8 rushing touchdowns to this point in the season. So for whatever reason, the Heisman people really love like just overall total touchdowns and that stat, which touchdowns are fluky anyway. But what he's doing on the ground and through the air is remarkable. So it's really, I mean, I know that Dart had his mess up this week, but he's still very much in the mix. Ward is still very much in the mix. Miami almost blew it too. But yeah, Milroe, just because of fresh off of beating Georgia, it's hard to deny that he's just an obvious favorite.
Yeah, and this is probably not the right time to bet him. Last week would have been the right time to bet him. This would probably be the right time to bet like a Jackson Dart or a Nico Yamaleave. A player that's ahead of both of them in the race right now is Dylan Gabriel, quarterback for the Oregon Ducks, and he might very well break a bunch of records here. His completion percentage is insane right now. A lot of it's dink and dunking. I don't really see a path to Dylan Gabriel winning the Heisman outside of an undefeated season for Oregon, in which he continues to put up numbers. But the second we get a loss, we being Oregon, I think he drops and might not even get to New York.
Yeah.
To me, I would not, even with it being plus 1,400, to me, that's not a good value bet.
No. And for whatever reason, their passing game's just been weird this year.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about that before on another episode. And as soon as it gets right, it gets weird again. And last week, Tez Johnson, they did finally use him vertically a little bit, which was refreshing on one of the touchdowns, especially. But they're not airing it out like I thought they would to hopefully get Dylan Gabriel like to the records. You know, like he's moving up the leaderboard. He's like right there. His completion percentage is just through the roof. It's still over 80%, which is crazy. But because his average depth of target's like negative 19 yards, you know, so it's just a lot of boom bust with not very much intermediate execution. And part of that, I think, is because of Gabriel's slight physical limitations to really like zip it in there, like on a really tough intermediate throw. A lot of systems haven't really asked him to do that a whole lot anyway. But yeah, it's going to be tough. I would actually still much prefer Jackson Dart. I know that right now that's like, wait, what? You're insane, Travis. Didn't we just see them lose? Yes, but that's exactly why.
Plus 2,000.
Right now is yeah, because his everything stats are still through the roof. And as much as people like to say that they care about the overall picture and don't just overvalue any one stat, he's still probably going to lead most meaningful categories by the end of the season, unless something weird happens. So, and we'll get to my, I guess right now is better than any to really talk about the updated quarterback model, because he's still number 1 in terms of the numbers that matter in predicting future NFL draft capital.
Jackson Dart.
Yes, in the fourth quarter, it did not go well for him. He had a couple errant throws and decisions, but even so, he's still by all the meaningful metrics, adjusted yards per attempt, it's over 13 still, which is like breaking football. His passer ratings over 200. All his yards per game, touchdowns per game, all those stats are silly still. And so, like the counting stats, the Heisman voters, they love that. Like at the end of it. So if he keeps winning and doesn't have a big kind of mess up at all down the stretch, he's going to be in the mix, if not, the favorite when it's all said and done. So I know that coming off a loss, that sounds weird, but that's exactly why you lean into it now.
Yeah, like we said, like this is the wrong time to bet Jalen Milrow. It's the right time to bet him. A guy that I kind of want to put a bet on. Again, I already told you I can't. But Quinn Ewers for me, he's about to come back. He's going to come back just in time for Oklahoma and then Georgia. Like he's coming down or coming back for the right time to make a case. To me, if he's able to take Texas to the SEC championship game, he's going to be right there in the mix. And I don't think people are going to hold missing a game against ULM and whoever else they played against him. I think he still ends up, while maybe not having all the counting stats, like the per game type numbers, I could see him. So at plus 2,500, I just think that's a really great value right now.
Yeah, I think he could definitely climb up into the mix, and the pressure is going to be on. He's got this prime opportunity to prove himself and that he's still better than Arch Manning.
Yeah, like he's being pushed, right? Like he's being pushed internally. And I think for competitors, like people like you and me, Travis, like we get up for that kind of stuff. I think Quinn Ewers will too.
Like you and me. Yes. We're definitely on par with Division I college athletes.
Your
at this
flag
point.
football, my volleyball league. Come on, buddy.
Yeah.
We're athletes.
Super high pedigree athletes right here. But yeah, I think that if it was a little bit more than plus, once you get it to plus 2,500, it's very low implied probability, right? I mean, it's like sub 4%, but especially
which
like,
I just think that number's off on Quinn Ewers. I think it should be higher.
Yeah,
is basically what I'm telling people.
Yeah, I think it should be a little bit higher, and the plus 2,000 on Jackson Dart should be much higher.
Yeah. And then your thoughts, one more name I just want to hear you talk about for a second here is just Nico Iamaleava, the quarterback for Tennessee. He hasn't been asked to do a ton. They had that big win against Oklahoma, but they're about to be playing some very high profile games.
Yeah, I think he's still in the mix, but he's probably overpriced at being like plus 1,400 just because of what Tennessee's been able to do as an overall offense. Now, if they do win one of these games against Alabama or Georgia, probably going to change because the hype is he's already the $8 million man,
right?
So, and he's already on this offense that's high flying. But I think Oklahoma's defense put on display how you could at least slow them down, and I think that that showed that Nico is still human, and so I think that will be revealed to us again against Alabama and Georgia. Like this is just the year. He is so special and he is so good, but we're just a year ahead at this point. So his Heisman year is next year, probably not this year.
Yeah, I like that take, and they're still gonna have so many weapons there. Let's look not quite as far ahead as next year, but let's look at this upcoming week because while we don't have like a bunch of incredible we don't have Georgia, Alabama this week, but we have some interesting games. I think at the beginning of the year, we would have thought this Clemson Florida State game would have been really exciting. I'm the only thing that shocks me here is Clemson's only favored by 14.5 right now. That seems a little short. So that's something I'm going to be playing. And then one of the other kind of games that they're trying to get us really excited about is this Iowa at Ohio State, and the point spread's minus 20. So crazy. I did some digging, Travis, and there's only two games, that feature a top 25 teams that are less than a touchdown spread this week.
Yeah, which is kind of a bummer. I mean, that, like you framed it up top, it's not a great slate, but we're gonna get some stupid results. It's just gonna happen. So, yeah, maybe it's gonna be one of these games. Maybe like one of these games that's supposed to be within like a field goal ends up being a blowout.
Right. And what's crazy too is so in the top 25, there's only those two games with a spread of less than a touchdown, and it's actually the team that's either unranked or ranked lower is favored at home. So we've got number 9 Missouri going to Texas A&M. Texas A&M, the 25th ranked team, and they're favored by 2. And then Washington, unranked, favored by 2.5 at home versus Michigan, who's somehow still at number 10. Now, I will say right now, we will not get into any AP talk because I think it is so pointless talking about rankings this early, other than just for like exercises like we're doing right now. But what are your thoughts on? Let's start at this Michigan, because we talked about them a little bit. Traveling to Seattle to play this Husky team that just lost to Rutgers. Yeah, they missed a bunch of field goals. They maybe should have won that game. I think they probably were the better team. They probably are better than Rutgers, but they lost. And now you got a Michigan team who's going to try to run the ball down your throat. Like, do we just smash the under and we don't even care who wins this game? Like, what is your expectation here? Because both offenses struggle.
That's probably the play. Just smash the under and walk away.
Don't watch.
no, don't even watch because it's just going to stress you out. But no, Washington overall has been actually pretty effective on offense. They struggled, and like you said, they missed field goals. Then what happens when you're attempting field goals? You're actually moving the ball and getting within scoring range. And so I think they're going to be able to move the ball enough to get in range to kick some field goals. And their defense hasn't been too terrible. And so I think that I believe that the line is correct to have them favored, which might feel weird given that, hey, doesn't Michigan have all this NFL talent up front on their defense? And they do, with Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant and Will Johnson, who's saved everyone's butt a couple of times with 2 pick sixes already. But I think that when it comes down to it, like Washington's actually been a top 10-ish defense on the year as well. And if you adjust for opponent, probably not so. But in terms of like a yards per play basis, they're a top 10 unit. And so if you put that up against a quarterback in Alex Orji that's not a quarterback, and they've not been able to do anything, if they just don't give up an explosive or 3 to Mullings at running back and Donovan Edwards, if he could do a thing, then Washington's going to win. And honestly, they might be able to win by multiple possessions. Like that might be the quote unquote surprise. Like, whoa, where did this come from? Dude, have you been watching Michigan? They are inept. They cannot do a single thing. Like nothing works for them on offense, except for like 1 or 2 explosives a game at all. And so it's just not sustainable what they've been doing at all. And they got shut down like on the second half by Minnesota and almost gave up a ridiculous comeback because they could not move the ball.
Yeah. Alex Orji has 133 passing yards on the season.
Yeah, that's pretty good, right?
Will Rogers has 10 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. And I think that the lack of turnovers is what will keep Washington from, shooting themselves in the foot and giving Michigan that opportunity. So this is a game that when I saw that line, my instinct was, oh, you got to play Michigan. And then the more you think about it, the more you look at it, you're like, no, I play the under and walk away, to your point. The under is at 41.5, so it's disgustingly low. But
if it's minus 2.5, I'm just playing Michigan or playing Washington too. I mean, this year I've been covering Michigan a whole lot more just out of necessity, just because of our riding team that we have in place, and it's unwatchable garbage. And if it weren't for like 2-3 explosive plays on the year that were just unrepeatable nonsense, they would have 2 more losses.
Yeah, Mullings has been really fun in DFS because he's been pretty cheap. That's probably not going to be the case. He probably will be more expensive than Donovan Edwards this week. I haven't checked yet, though. The next game with the 2 top 25 teams, you've got Mizzou traveling to Texas A&M. One of the stranger football programs from my perspective is Texas A&M. I just don't get them. The traditions are bizarre, but cool. Go Aggies or whatever. Mizzou has kind of been underwhelming for a lot of the year, but they have been getting wins. Yet here they are rolling in as a 2-point dog. And to me, another game that I just don't know what to expect. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Kind of Brady Cook's performance this year is kind of what I think we expected, like him coming down to earth a little bit. Luther hasn't, I don't know if he wasn't being used earlier in the season, but like he's kind of warming up a little bit now. I think it's hard to put much faith and trust in this Missouri team at the moment. But Texas A&M, like, if they go back to Wegman, like, can they score on offense? I don't know.
Yeah, and Marcel Reed, props to him coming in. He's not been crazy lights out as a passer. He hasn't really had to throw a ton, but he adds some value in terms of being a threat with his legs, and so that makes I think he brings more value than Wigman did, and so in that regard, and so that makes him tough to defend. And we just saw Mizzou actually struggle with Vanderbilt not too long ago,
In
and so
Boston
if
College.
yes, exactly. And so if Reed can stress the defense as a rushing threat and do just enough as a passer, which is basically what he's been doing as is thus far, then I think that they very well should be the favorite as well, even if regardless of who is at quarterback, whether it's Wigman or Reed. But Reed, I think, actually just gives them a kind of a problem. It might be the better option, just I don't know, just for practical college football purposes. Maybe not for like pro prospects, but he's just a really tough matchup and tough guy to scheme for and plan for. So I like A&M here, which is weird to say, to be
Yeah,
honest.
so Missouri's coming off a bye week, so they've got a little bit of time to prepare. Texas A&M, meanwhile, came off a pretty tough, brutal game against Arkansas, and then also barely squeaked out a win against Bowling Green before that. So that's why I'm not betting this, because I'm just like, I need to take Missouri. And so I'm just not going to take Missouri. But they're giving me 2 points. They're giving me 2 points. But 2 points is not enough.
It's so enticing. But you're probably smart to stay away.
Mizzou probably wins by like 14 or loses by 4. Like it's something crazy is going to happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do want to get your thoughts on just kind of the week coming up as a whole, like given that the slate is a little bit, we don't have any like absolute must-watch bangers. Are there any low-key games that you're excited about that maybe the public at large might not realize that they need to tune into, other than of course watching? The reason Ashton Jeanty might actually crush this record is because they get to play teams like Utah State the rest of the way. That's who they play. And there's no way they'll ever let Jeanty be on the slate, but if he ever is in DFS, man, that'll be fun.
Yeah. It's just not even fair. Any time that you can watch Ashton Jeanty play football, just do it. Like, I know that sometimes they're on really late, but this week it's kind of like in prime time at 6:00, and it's like you can choose to watch Clemson and Florida State because those are the brands and those are the helmets.
Gross.
But do you really want to watch Brock Glenn play quarterback at Florida State and then Clemson just smash them by a bunch? Like, that's going to be boring really quickly. So just watch Ashton Jeanty do his thing. Like, that's the low key fun game that I'm wanting to check out, just because anytime that I can, I'm going to be watching him. And beyond that, like, I really want to see Ole Miss in South Carolina, because it's at South Carolina, and I want to see the bounce back, because Jackson Dart is still going to put up some bonkers numbers, and if he can do so against one of the best defensive fronts in the nation, I don't think people understand that that's the case with South Carolina. Then I'm going to be really intrigued again for his draft prospects, and I still am, despite, again, just a couple mistakes last week down the stretch, and Kentucky playing coward ball. So
yeah,
I'm gonna have my eyes on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fun one. We'll get to see. I think we're going to see a bounce back from Ole Miss. There's someone who I've got circled as a potential, like, just blind bet it no matter what they say, because I just feel like they're going to come out with something to prove.
Yeah, and honestly, like, even after the quote unquote letdown, like, they just never had the ball. Like, they're still averaging almost 8.5 yards per play. Like, they're still on pace to be a top 5 offense of all time in terms of efficiency. So,
Wild.
yeah, I know that it's a lot of the schedule, but I think that they bounce back and do just fine this week.
Nice. Well, let's kind of talk bigger picture here about the, I was going to say, upcoming draft. It is upcoming, but not anytime soon. But let's talk a little bit about, like, just some of these college players here that are eligible for the upcoming draft. So we're talking about, juniors, seniors, redshirt sophomores, I suppose, but I don't think we have any of those in here. But let's talk about some of this draft capital. How do you want to do this, Travis? Because you've got kind of a list here with quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers, and where you kind of think they'll end up landing. Do you want to go position by position, or just kind of highlight some of the key players here?
Let's knock out quarterbacks first. Let's go by position. And again, this is not even really my rankings per se, but it is, it is derived a little bit from what meaningful metrics typically predict capital, and then there are a couple exceptions as well. So we can get to that. But
Yeah. So the names that we've talked about already, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, and Cam Ward. I think no one will be surprised. I don't think anyone should be surprised to hear their names as a first round quarterback. But you actually have a fourth name in here that might not be the one people expect us to say, because it's not Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah. So Drew Aller. And I get all sorts of crap. I've had to mute a couple threads because this spring I was definitely critical, honestly, of Drew Aller and his spring game performance, which I know
Yes.
it was windy, but I made a cut up because it was just laughable how
trolled a
bad
little
he
bit.
was, that day. But he always had the potential. He just kind of, whether it was the scheme or his lack of confidence in his playmakers or whatever it was in years prior, we just hadn't really seen him go off like we thought his potential indicated that he might be able to. And so thus far, in terms of meaningful metrics and predicting future NFL production, he's like a top 6 quarterback in the nation. Like it's Jackson Dart and Cameron Ward and Jalen Milroe in terms of meaningful metrics, being like total adjusted net yards per attempt and QBR and EPA per play and things like that actually mean something in terms of future NFL success and draft capital prediction. But Arch Manning and his performance, that's number 4 thus far. Curtis Rourke actually and Indiana, because they just keep on killing everybody.
I hate that you hate Indiana, because I would love for this just to become an Indiana podcast.
It won't. It will not. No, I went to Purdue. I will always hate Indiana no matter what. So, but I like Curtis Rourke too, and I hate it. I hate that I do. But now I hate it. But no, that's going to calm down. Early in the year, the model always has a few that are funny. But like once they play real teams, that calms down a bit. But number 6 is Drew Aller. And so he's like right there, and he's got the size, and people are going to get enamored with the fact that he actually is putting it together this year, and so he's actually he's going to be a first round pick. And I don't think a lot of people are privy to that pace and that momentum just yet, but I think that's going to be the case. He's going to be that last name that gets thrown in the hat alongside Shedeur Sanders and Carson Beck. It's going to be another one of those classes where it's like they're going to try to make 6 first rounders a thing, and maybe it happens again. But the meaningful metrics don't agree that should be the case. And the 2 names that are actually on the outside looking in by typical draft capital predictive standards based on numbers that matter are Shedeur Sanders and Carson Beck, because they just have not been perfect to date. No, not near it, honestly. And I know Shedeur has made some crazy bonkers throws at times, like that one play. I guess it was was it Jeanty Wester that made the
Hail Mary?
It was Wester.
Yeah.
But even that throw, it's like people were, lauding the throw, and it's like, guys, he just threw it up in the end zone.
Mm-hmm.
Like that wasn't actually, like, it was cool that he got it there, but that was the play design. Roll to your opposite hand because they won't expect that. Buy yourself enough time and then just launch it. And he did. And so without that throw, he's barely a top 30 quarterback in the nation by the numbers that matter. I know that he passes a lot, and so people see the yardage volume, and they assume that, again, he's really, really good. And he's a good college quarterback. He's a very good college quarterback.
Has he changed your mind in the slightest? Because I know you were lower than consensus. It's quite a bit lower on consensus.
Yeah, sure. So I would say it's like, okay, the more that you play above average, the more that you continue to play well above average, the better. Like the longer that you do that, the better. But he still has some of the same issues before. Whether it's holding the ball too long, he's not doing that so much as much this year. But the decision making is still not there at times, and that's been put on display in just a couple instances this year. So I'm not saying that he can't be a first round pick, and I don't want to pick him apart and really go play by play and just break it down. But I've watched him a ton. I've watched Carson Beck a ton, and I'm like, what are my numbers lying? Like, what's going on? Like, and it's just still not there in terms of projecting with utmost, high success rates, that he's a first round pick. That's just all there is to it. So whether it's his yards per play marks, his adjusted yards per attempt, and or anything like that, it's not there. So I'm not saying that he can't be a first round pick, and he's probably going to be a first round pick when it's all said and done. But that he's not going to be a hit rate kind of success story projection by anything that matters.
Yeah, and the one thing that your model cannot predict for is people really liking the fact that his dad is prime. Like there's certain elements off the field stuff that gets baked that can't get baked into some of your modeling.
And I think a lot of the time maybe I oversold it in terms of being negative about him. It's really just to offset the fact that the hype of him being like the first overall pick has just never made sense.
Yeah.
It's okay to like say he's a top 6 quarterback in the draft. Like that's day 2 projection. And if that's the case, you're a top 6 quarterback implied maybe in all of college football at any given time. So that's not saying he's bad. And I'm just not saying that. I'm just saying that the first overall hype is just literally never going to be warranted.
Right. Let's talk about your others in the potential first 3 round mix, the day 2 capital. You've got Garrett Nussmeier from LSU, who I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he stuck around another year.
Yeah.
And then Cade Klubnik, Clemson, similar story. I think he might stick around another year. And Cade Klubnik is someone who, since that Georgia game, just looks like he's angry at the world and wants to score points because that's the only way he can find happiness. Like he's on a mission.
Seriously though, I mean, I would be really tired of failing if I were him too, because he was not good last year, and he had a lot of hype coming in as a recruit. But he really does look like he's put it together since the Georgia game, that is. And so he's actually in the same productive model that is really good at predicting capital. Like last year, for instance, the top 6 quarterbacks that declared in this model all went in the first round. And so like that just happens. He's actually 14th in terms of all Power 4 quarterbacks so far, which is way higher than he's been before. Like he was outside the top 30 all of last year. Never really came close. And so to see him really putting it together, and just from a raw volume standpoint, but just I think that really just decision-making standpoint, and being able to find success downfield at times too. That was something that we just did not see a ton of. Like I was so tired of like the 6 yards per attempt games from him. It's like, that's like, dude, just air it out. And he's kind of doing it.
And he's been showing some mobility too, which has been
and he always had that
too.
But Nussmeier, I think he comes back ultimately, so that's why he's kind of like a question mark for me. He needs to have more than one season.
I agree.
So, and I think he's not really in a rush. He just wants to do it right, and that was his kind of thought process in sticking with LSU. So I think he sticks around for one more year. But if he does declare, I think he's still in the day 2 mix.
Yeah, that's a good one. Let's jump over to running back. We've already talked about the sole first round back that you have here projected in Ashton Jeanty. Again, is there a world where he eclipses 2,200 yards and isn't a first round pick? Could you see, given the NFL's trend of waiting a little bit on running backs in the last couple of years, do you think he could slip into round 2, or do you think if he continues to produce, if he continues on pace, I mean, slows down a little bit maybe, but do you expect him to get that first round capital pretty easily, pretty assuredly?
I think so at this point. I mean, I said something about like if he isn't a top 5 back, even on Saturday, if he isn't a top 5 back, I don't even know what we're doing. And people were like, what do you mean top 5? He's running back 1. And I'm like, yes, I didn't say he wasn't. It's just, I didn't know how many angry people there would be that I was even implying he could be anything but running back 1. Already existed. But it's just not normal to have a non-power conference running back as the number 1 overall running back. That's the weird thing. It doesn't happen for the most part, especially now with the transfer portal and people transferring up. And so props to him for sticking it out with Boise State. But I think enough people have come around to the fact that what he's doing is truly just otherworldly. And so I think at this point, he's just going to be a first round pick. And if not an early first round pick.
How early is too early for Ashton Jeanty?
I
Is
don't
he
know.
like Elliott early or
I don't think that.
I
It's
know
just
it's tough.
we're kind of in outlier territory with him
Yeah.
already, right?
It's like
I think
Travis
that
Hunter. Like, it could be anything, like Travis
yeah,
Hunter could be the first player taken overall.
yeah. I think first half of the first round, but top 10, top 5 is a little no. But he's just a really special talent, so he deserves first round capital regardless of his position.
Yeah, and these next 3 running backs that you have listed here that are you kind of have projected to go in round 2 are all really special running backs as well. You've got Quinshon Judkins and Trevion Henderson both at Ohio State. Trevion not really been asked to do quite as much yet, as I was expecting more. I'll just say that. And then Nick Singleton, of course, for Penn State, who slow, like he's not slow, like he'll have a slow game, and then all of a sudden he just busts one for 65 yards. And like, oh yeah, there's that speed that we remember, and that power, and that like the Penn State running back mold that you would hope for is right there, and he's extremely good.
Regardless of how productive he is overall down the stretch, I think NFL is just going to be enamored with his physical profile, and he's going to kill the combine. And his explosive play rate, I think this year is going to be better than it was in previous seasons. And he's already showing a little bit more consistency on a down-to-down basis too. So in terms of like just the overall success rate and consistency to crank out positive plays rather than dancing, trying to take advantage of that athleticism. And so that's been good to see. Nick Singleton's going to be, I think he's probably that second round profile because he's probably not going to have the perfect production. And then the Quinshon Judkins and Trevion Henderson, they actually both are over 8 yards per carry right now. I mean, again, just silly stats through this point of the season. That's probably going to chill out down the stretch, but that tandem, like they're clearly just trying to stay fresh because they both know they're going to be early picks next year. Like that was going to be the case with Henderson last year. He chose to come back, and man, Judkins and Henderson should both be top 4 or 5, kind of running backs in this class. They don't really need to prove much else because they both have put the peak of their game has been so ridiculous that we don't really need to see them go off for bonkers numbers.
Right. It is interesting because through 4 games, like Trevion only has 30 carries, like he's only getting like 7. I'm really bad at math, Travis. He's getting like 7 carries a game. So like it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to generate first round capital when Ashton Jeanty is running for 2,500 yards and you're running for 800. But you did it on 80 carries, like.
And I think once they're in more neutral game script situations, if they even are, because Ohio State's so stacked, he'll get some more work. But
real quick, we're not talking about Will Howard, but I am so curious to see what Will Howard looks like against a real defense because he's another one that I'm not sold on 100% just yet. Anyway, let's talk. You've got a lot of kind of running backs that could go round 3, that kind of, that round 3 to 6 running back. A lot of times it just comes down to preference and who the other team just took, because people really do fall in love with a specific type of back. Amarian Hampton and Trevor Etienne, 2 names that pop out at me. Ollie Gordon is a name that maybe some would have expected, going into the season to be more in that round 2 conversation, but he just hasn't been producing this year.
No.
And it's surprising because Oklahoma State brought back so much of that offensive line.
Yeah. Ollie Gordon has been kind of a disappointment. And so if that continues, there's no way he's going to be a first or second rounder. And he's been showing a little bit of the concerns I saw before in that, like when I watch him play, he breaks off big plays, and I'm like, I don't know how this is happening. You don't look like you're fast enough to make that happen.
Sure.
And so he's just not getting to the second level and third level of the defense as much. And so maybe he fixes it. But at this rate, it's just you can't really project him to be a top 5 back in the class at this point, which is really, really disappointing. Hampton continues to find ways to produce for North Carolina, even though North Carolina is just a mess at this point.
I think James Madison just scored again.
I think so. So Hampton, he's just from his very first start has been really impressive. And I would not be surprised if he tested well too. So he's probably right there in the mix to be running back 5 in the class. Etienne kind of took things over for the Kentucky game, and it was the difference that week. but he really needs to string some weeks together. Otherwise, he's not going to be super early pick either. But there's
Don't
just
think
this
the name and
massive
the
tier.
the
Yeah, I
name and the
mean,
logo don't.
yeah,
They'll boost, but yeah, maybe not enough.
yeah. But there's just so many players. Jordan James of Oregon, Devin Neal of Kansas, DJ Giddens at Kansas State, Dylan Sampson as the speed that he brings and the explosion that he
Yes,
brings at Tennessee. He's going to be one of those kind of later
Miami
risers.
Dolphins.
Yeah, he'll be a Dolphin next year. Exactly. But and even like Kalel Millings, what he's done in terms of yards after contact per attempt this year has just been insane. Just breaking tackles.
I just
As
assumed he was like a freshman or sophomore
no, he's
because
old.
I hadn't
Yeah,
heard his name last year, so
yeah,
I was like, oh wow, no, okay.
he's been around.
Yeah.
So, but that kind of profile is like, okay, that probably looks more like an early day 3. But he's at least in the mix. Jaden Blue, he tweaked his ankle, and so that's kind of messing up him. Davian Martinez, a lot of people like him, but he's not really been super efficient either. So there's a lot of guys though. There's a massive tier once you get outside like the top 4. The top 4 being clearly Ashton Jeanty, Quinshawn Judkins, Trevian Henderson, and Nick Singleton. After you get out after that, it's like pick your favorite one, man. Like,
Yeah.
like there's a lot that could be in that mix for the 5 spot.
Who is your favorite one? Is it Dylan Sampson?
No, I probably not. I think it's Amarian Hampton, just because what he's done more consistently, and I think his profile is just going to be really nice overall. Even as a receiving back, he's showing some value this year too. So yeah, I'd probably go with him at 5.
Okay. I like that. And yeah, I even think your order for those top 4 or 5 is probably spot on. I mean, maybe Trevion and Singleton switch out, but depending on the season goes. But I think that's really solid. Let's jump into wide receiver where Arizona just beat Utah and Ted McMillan only had like 50 yards receiving. Like just surprising in all kinds of way. But Ted McMillan comes in as your first receiver on your list for first round capital. Alongside him, Luther Burden, Isaiah Bond, Travis Hunter, and Emeka Egbuka. Isaiah Bond to me is a player who, for me, I know not for you, but because you already had him pretty high, I did not, and he has been soaring up my board because I texted you the other day, like he just plays so much bigger than he is, and he's fast and he can occupy space. He doesn't get hit too hard. Like he's just a really smart football player, and I could totally see him becoming an absolute star in the NFL.
Yeah, it's hard not to like Isaiah Bond, and so I mean, coming into the year, it was obviously Luther Burden, Ted McMillan, Emeka Egbuka. Some people had Evan Stewart up there in the mix, and then Isaiah Bond was the obvious other guy, and then Travis Hunter because he was like a corner and wide
Yeah.
receiver. I'm a little bit further down on Evan Stewart because we needed him to have the breakout season, and he's not getting there quite there yet. But
And he won't.
the top 5 seem pretty chalky to me in terms of Ted McMillan of Arizona, Luther Burden of Mizzou, Isaiah Bond, Texas, Travis Hunter of Colorado, and Egbuka of Ohio State. And I know some people are like, wait, Egbuka, why? The hype is about Jeremiah Smith, not Egbuka. But Emeka Egbuka was like 2 years ago. I'm going to say this 1,000 times if I need to. But 2 years ago, he was almost as impressive in terms of the production profile as Marvin Harrison Jr. was. And now he last year was not healthy for much of the year, and we didn't see the same player. But this year, he actually has been very good yet again. And not only that, he's been really good as a blocker too, which teams are obsessed with finding like X wide receivers who can block and succeed in any kind of pre-snap alignment. And, the route tree diversity that he's continued to show, the ball skills, the everything. And he's been a 5-star since the beginning. Like the expectations were there, and he's kind of living up to them anyway. So to me, that's probably the only questionable one for many people, but he's going to be the 5th wide receiver that's going in the first round.
Yeah, I like that. Let's he mentioned Evan Stewart, and I hit my phone right away because you have him kind of falling into that round 2, and I think it might be worse than that.
Probably so. Yeah.
I mean, Troy Franklin was a receiver, same offensive scheme, different quarterback, but a player that we saw get an unusually high target share for an Oregon wide receiver, right? And it looks like Oregon has gone back to their ways of just being like, we don't care who we throw the ball to. We just want to throw it to an open guy because they're all fast and they're all good. And so whether it's Trashon Holden, that one was for you,
you.
or if it's Tez, or if it's Stewart, like they don't, or even Ferguson, like they don't care who they're throwing it to. Like they're not forcing it, or Evan Stewart's not earning the target share that he needs to get first round capital, or in my opinion, even second round. So I hope Troy Franklin would be that Oregon Duck to break the curse and get in the first round. Then I thought it'd be Evan Stewart. It's not going to be either of them.
No, at this point, he's just not playing like a first round wide receiver at all.
Yeah.
It really cheapens what a first round wide receiver is when we realize that Xavier Legette and Ricky Pearsall just went first round.
Yeah, so
but it's just
anyone can go.
Apparently, in the last couple picks, anyone can go anyway. Well, like a real first round pick, like top 20, what was worthy, like top whatever. Typically, like the early first round safe picks, all 5 of the other guys could be, top 20-ish picks when it's all said and done. Evan Stewart's not going to be that. Just unless something changes drastically, that's not going to be the case. But Trey Harris, on the other hand, has been soaring. And so to me, he's a lock for top 50 capital. Trey Harris, of course, wide receiver, Ole Miss, and is on pace to lead the nation in most every single stat that matters. And so, it's taken up over 30% of Ole Miss's crazy efficient offense, over 800 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns. Just the raw stats are crazy, but even the adjusted metrics in terms of yards per team pass attempt are above the thresholds that you want to see for the nerds. And he's just more than just like a contested catch guy this year. He's really rounding things out and creating separation, being able to stack vertically, and making the right reads on. It's hard to kind of tell from like broadcast angles, and so if you can get some all 22, it's better. But even like on stuff that's clearly option routes based on coverage reads, like he's just making the right play. So a couple instances where like they faced, I don't know what post snap turned out to be like a cover 4 look, just because teams are trying to play all vertical and everything and just take away the deep stuff. He made the right read in multiple cases, getting his stem just right to set up an easy pitch and catch for Jackson Dart. And so just feel like he's taken his game to a different level that we haven't seen before. And to me, that just makes him look like a top 50 lock.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Berrien Brown had a big game against that Ole Miss team on that 4th down reception. He's a guy that we've liked a lot. You've liked a lot. You always mention just his dynamic playmaking ability as a kick returner. You have him kind of slotted here in the 2nd round as well. Do you think the first round dreams are over just because Kentucky's offense is so anemic?
Maybe the NFL just looks at the traits that he has and goes, we just have to get him on our team, because Brown, yes, he's just really dynamic. That offense is completely useless to do anything for anyone. And unfortunately, that's been the case dating back to when Will Levis was the quarterback. It was useless then. And again, that's making a whole lot more sense now for those who are paying attention to the NFL, because he's a complete and utter failure at the next level. And I don't know how everyone didn't see that coming. But
we told them.
Yeah, seriously. But so it's just frustrating that he's had just nothings at quarterback 3 years in a row. Just completely ruined what could have been a really special, productive career. But that's what happens when you choose to go to Kentucky, I guess.
and stay at Kentucky, because he could have gone to just about anywhere. I think he's the type of player that might have a more successful NFL future than a college career, and that's pretty rare. I guess not. I guess that happens. The last guy
exception, but yeah.
The last guy you have here is Ayamanor. Not someone who really is seen on our television sets all that often, except for people who have like 8 screens going at once, Travis.
Yeah.
And me.
Yeah. But Alec Ayamanor is just somebody that it's hard to ignore. He is a little bit more of a contested catch guy with a more limited route tree than you'd like to see. But that kind of profile still gets taken in the 2nd round by some team every single year. So I think he's in the mix to be a 2nd round pick. If at worst case, probably 3rd round pick, just because of what he's done against some really top tier talents. Again, with nothing throwing him the ball.
Yeah, I mean, we saw what he did against Travis Hunter last year.
Yeah,
dude can ball.
dunking on him for like the
Yeah,
entire game.
literally just, I'm sorry, but you can't reach this high.
Yeah, yeah,
Get your step stool. Let's talk about some of these third round guys. Some familiar names, some guys that we've talked about quite a bit on this show in Ja'Cory Brooks, Dion Burks, Kyron Lacey, Tez Johnson, to name a few. And then let's go way, way back to like his true freshman year when we really were excited. You were really excited, and I think for good reason. And Antonio Williams. Felton has been getting just like targets galore and producing with them. So I like that call out a lot. And then Bernard getting a little bit of a shot with Alabama from time to time. Not quite getting the amount of volume that some thought, and I think part of that is just because they've got that one kid on the team, that true freshman that keeps stealing all these targets for good reason.
Yeah, so it gets really weird once you get outside of the second round kind of projection in this class, and in most classes it gets a little wonky once you get into round 3 at wide receiver. But this year, I think like Kyron Lacey at LSU has been the most productive one there, but like Aaron Anderson is really impressed as well. So it's like maybe he down the stretch this year proves to be the better wide receiver. Like there's a few different wide receiver rooms that it's kind of that situation. Like Deion Burks is on this list, but Nick Anderson hasn't been healthy. And if he all of a sudden is healthy at some point, he could kind of overtake him.
Yeah.
But he has like nothing on the year. So it's just hard to really project. And Burks even has been not completely himself and is averaging like less than 10 yards per reception. So some weird profiles once you get into the round 3 range. Tez Johnson had like an ADOT near like the line of scrimmage, like had like 5 or 6 air yards through the first few weeks. And so kind of weird. But Ja'Cory Brooks is the guy that if he's going to climb much higher than round 3, his ceiling would allow him to do so, I think, more so than many of these other guys. Because what we saw him do early on his career, I guess in Bryce Young's final year, he kind of became the clutch gene guy that just made the play that mattered with Bryce Young at Alabama. And then he got doghoused. I still have not gotten good sourced information that I trust to really put something on the air with that. But they just tossed him in the trash last year and were like, you're not going to see the field. And that's just a shame because he was wasted. And this year he's been one of the most productive, wide receivers in the entire country. And so really love to see him getting that bounce back and averaging almost 100 receiving yards a game and four touchdowns already. And the ball skills that he's putting on display in a few occasions have just been ridiculous. So I hope he actually sees, consistent play like this all year long. Because if he does, he's probably a second round pick.
Yeah, I love to hear it. So I'm gonna have, this is a wild card question for you because it's not reality. Let's pretend that right now the NFL, college, they changed the rules. Freshmen can also. We're going to go back way back when we had that year where Maurice Claret was able to go. How early does Ryan get drafted at receiver?
Ryan Williams is the first round pick this year if he's draft eligible.
I love that
And
so much.
Jeremiah Smith is also a first round pick if he's eligible this year.
Yeah, who do you like better? And where'd Cam be?
Cam would probably be
Coleman. Sorry, Cam Coleman.
Yeah, Cam Coleman.
We're on a first name basis with all these guys. I mean, we
no.
shoot pool after games on Saturdays.
I wish, dude, that'd be fun.
That would be fun.
Cam Coleman's probably a second rounder after this year. Like they're both.
He's coming on. I've enjoyed watching some of. I don't watch Auburn games like die hard, but watching some highlights, he looks like he's going to be good, like real good.
And that might sound silly to people who don't follow all 3 of those players really closely, but Jeremiah Smith is maybe already better than Emeka Egbuka, and he's a freshman. And that's not a knock against Egbuka. It's just Jeremiah Smith is Julio Jones like already. Like it's just, and so
can you imagine being Emeka Egbuka as talented as you are and never being the best wide receiver on your team? And that's just crazy town. Like,
and then the next year you have Jeremiah Smith, who's the number 1 player in the country in his recruiting class and is out doing that. So yeah, he and Ryan Williams would be first round picks. And I don't even think that's remotely controversial.
I just love that we have some really exciting talent coming into college football again. Like, I mean, we always have fun players, but at the wide receiver position specifically, That's just always, it's just good TV.
It is, and I think that well, and especially this year there would be first rounders because the depth of I saw Jim Nagy say something about this. The depth of this class at the very top in terms of first round prospects is lacking, at least in terms of players who have emerged necessarily thus far. So first round grades are low, and so this year especially they would be first round picks.
Yeah, that is interesting. I saw the headline. I did not read.
Yeah, and I had heard that actually before Nagy said it, but I found it interesting. He said it so early, given that it's just barely October. But
and that was my initial thought, was like, well, are we looking at this a little bit too soon? But I mean, who knows?
That's kind of been there. Are a couple services that do like the annual grades for pre-work stuff for a lot of teams that subscribe to their kind of help in addition to kind of like spot check their own internal grades, and those had a very, very low number in terms of like year over year comparison, even in the spring, to say that this class looked a little bit shallow. And so I thought I was like, oh, that's weird. That looks odd.
Sell all your second, third, and fourth round dynasty picks.
Yeah, but and it's actually really more so on like less so in the skill position department and more so like on other defensive positions. Yeah. So
the stuff that actually matters in football, that
yes.
pretend doesn't.
Yeah.
Man, the more I watch the NFL, the more I'm like, man, defense matters too much. This is stupid. I want there to be more scoring. I like college football so much more.
Yeah.
But man, this was so much fun. I mean, we're at an hour 20 here, so we're gonna wrap it up. But really good getting into it all. Of course, please do follow us wherever you do get your podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube, Total College Football. You know, we've got some new listeners. Thank you guys so much for traveling with us as we just go through this beautiful sport week by week, talking about all things college football, because we are Total College Football. Again, you can find Travis at FF_Travis M on Twitter. You can find his stuff, his work over at A to Z Sports. I'm Stefan Lako. You can find me at Stefan Lako, and you can find me over at Ready Bet Action if you are into sports betting stuff. Travis, it has been a pleasure. Thank you as always, and I look forward to doing this again with you next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait. And I just can't wait to watch things play out with the college football playoff because it's getting messy already. And that's been a lot of fun.
Already. And I don't even know what all the tiebreakers are yet. I don't know if anyone does. It's going to be amazing. Yeah. All right. We'll talk to you guys next week.